any kind of Zionist tendency should be treated in the same way as being a rabid neo-Nazi.
Just when you thought the media couldn't get worse, the New York Times decides to publish a thirsty profile for one of the most violent and unhinged people on the internet. We're going to break this down, plus influencers like Tim Pool take the White House and MSNBC melts down over Trump's latest policy announcement. All this and so much more is coming up on today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show, where we take on the craziest ideas from across the internet, the media, and our politics, all from an independent perspective. Guys, before we get into it, I'm so happy to be back. My boyfriend and I had a lovely trip to Italy. We got to even see AC Milan in person, which was wonderful, but I missed y'all, and I'm so happy to be back and making content again, and I missed so much Delulu and insanity while I was gone that I won't be able to talk about all of it, but I already have a list of things that we got to catch up on. But just out today, or actually I guess last night by the time you're hearing this, there was a big New York Times profile of Hasan Piker, the left-wing YouTuber and socialist streamer who rightfully is one of the most controversial people on the internet, but does have huge influence with Gen Z. And this New York Times profile can really only be described with one word: thirsty. This reporter who wrote this profile was basically just thirsting over this man and talking about how hot he is, while painting him as some sort of political whisperer or the Joe Rogan of the left, and completely ignoring, or mostly ignoring, his insane, radical, unhinged, and at times violent rhetorical past. The headline on this piece was, "A progressive mind in a MAGA body. Hasan Piker pumps iron, likes weapons, and wears pearls. His brand of masculinity has won him many fans online and has been a useful vehicle for his politics." This was so funny to me because just Hasan Piker, to be fair, I think he's crazy. I think his ideas are horrible. He's a handsome guy. He's very physically fit. He lifts, but that's a MAGA body now. Did the New York Times realize they just said that being attractive and fit is now like a right-wing thing? Are you all sure that that's something you want to double down on? You sure that's the message you're trying to send? Because I think in reality, both sides, people on either side can be fit, but very funny messaging to accidentally convey. Now we're going to get into the substance of this profile, which is some of the worst journalism I've seen in a long time after this. So I spend a lot of time on my phone, reading articles, watching videos, doom scrolling, research. But every now and then I find myself just mindlessly tapping through games, which is fine, but I recently found an app that makes that screen time more productive. It's called Test 'Em All, and it's basically a way to earn real rewards for playing games you'd probably be playing anyway. Here's how it works. You just download the app, you give it permissions to track your gameplay, and pick from a bunch of top games, including stuff that's already popular on the App Store or Google Play. Some even give you more coins than others. I played Crowd Express and earned 12,000 coins in just a few hours. As you play, the app tracks your progress and rewards you with coins. Then, when you've collected enough, you can cash out PayPal, Amazon gift cards, or even deals from brands you already use. I spent my coins on Amazon gift cards because I like it when my shopping comes to me. Test 'Em All also has weekend and daily promos to help you rack up coins faster. So hey, unless you're spending your time on social media watching my takes, maybe you should spend that time making some money instead. Use the link below or scan the QR code on screen to download Test 'Em All and get up to 3,999 coins just for signing up. Give it a try. You might as well make your screen time work for you. So guys, diving into this New York Times profile of Hasan Piker, who you guys know is a really controversial person, it just spent way too much time obsessing over how attractive this author apparently finds him to be. Mr. Piker's success on camera, in some part, has been aided by the fact that he is, by conventional standards, a very handsome man. He is 6 feet 4 inches tall and built like a professional athlete, with a square jaw, a beard, and a head of thick, dark hair. It's the one aspect that many of my haters can't shake, Mr. Piker said of his appearance in a Twitch broadcast last year. They can't turn around and be like, "You're not hot." Wow, well, he's very humble. Look, I think he's a decent looking guy. I think it's a little bit overhyped how hot he supposedly is, because in politics and in media, the bar is low. The bar is on the ground, because The cutest people are not in the room with us when it comes to politics and media. But it's sure, okay. What's the point though? Really? Like, he has such a massive influence of millions of people and you're going to just waste paragraph after paragraph on how hot he is? Really? Especially because this New York Times reporter ignored so much of the terrible things he said and done and advocates for that at times are straight up violent and even pro-terrorist, openly so. The closest the New York Times got to acknowledging any of this in this profile was under this one section. Always unfiltered, sometimes extreme. Mr. Piker is similarly unfiltered with his viewpoints. Some can be extreme. A vocal critic of U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East, Mr. Piker has been labeled anti-American by people across the political spectrum for saying the country deserved the September 11 attacks. His recent accusations that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza and his diatribes against the Zionist movement have led many supporters of Israel, including liberals like Representative Richie Torres of New York, to call Mr. Piker anti-Semitic. I find anti-Semitism to be completely unacceptable, Mr. Piker said on a call in April. I find the conflation of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism to be very dangerous, he added. So look, I'm glad they mentioned briefly the old clip where he says America deserved 9/11. Yes, seriously, that's what he says, which is evil and insane, but there's so much more that they left out. Hasan is not just a critic of Israel, okay? He says absolutely insane stuff, like this clip where he talks about Zionists.
I think like this will never happen, but in a totally just world, any kind of, regardless of your background, any kind of Zionist tendency should be treated in the same way as being a rabid neo-Nazi, and you shouldn't even let someone be the fucking local dog catcher as Felix was posting if they've ever exhibited any sort of like positive feelings about the state of Israel. I'm so serious about this.
So this is unhinged. Here he says that anybody who's a Zionist, which just means they believe that Israel has the right to exist, doesn't mean they support the war, doesn't mean they hate Palestinians, anything like that, should be shunned from public life and treated like a neo-Nazi. That's not extreme. That's extreme to an insane degree. And the New York Times just says, oh, well, he's a critic of Israel and he has called out their genocide in Gaza. Like, there's more to it than that they just totally ignore. I mean, for goodness sake, just last year, Hasan interviewed glowingly on his stream someone who he believed to be a member of the Houthis, a recognized terrorist organization. He also has said that he supports the Houthis. You would think that if you're going to do any sort of real journalism and profile this very influential internet personality, which, to be clear, I'm not a no platformer. I think that's a totally legitimate thing to do. But if you're going to capture any sort of full view of such an extreme person, you need to mention this kind of stuff. You can't just leave out all the parts where they openly and explicitly advocate and support terror groups and instead just spend paragraphs talking about how hot they are. Seriously? I knew the New York Times, I knew the standards had fallen. But this far? This bad? I mean, just a few months ago, this same guy, Hasan Piker, was out there calling for the death of a U.S. senator. Take a listen.
No, look, the White House has made a commitment. The president said over and over and over, we're not going to touch Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid. We've made the same commitment. Now, that said, what we are going to do is go into those programs and carve out the fraud, waste, and abuse and find efficiencies. Couple of examples. You know, there's about $50 billion estimated that are lost every year in Medicaid just in fraud alone.
That fraud is not coming from individuals, it's coming from providers. They're not tackling providers. They're not actually going after like false billing. They are trying to cut recipients, okay? It is not happening at the point of recipients. If you cared about Medicare fraud or Medicaid fraud, you would kill Rick Scott, okay? You wouldn't make Rick Scott, former governor of Florida, Rick Scott, you wouldn't make him the current, what is his current office? What is he? He's the Richard Lynn Scott, is an American attorney, businessman, politician, Navy veteran, serving as the senior United States Senator from Florida, a seat he has held since 2019. And also, I believe this past election cycle, he was literally the f***ing head of the, what was it, like the Senate committee or something? Like the Republican fundraising initiatives. The reason why I'm saying if you cared about Medicare or Medicaid fraud, you would kill Rick Scott is because, and not make him a prominent part of the Republican Party, is because he, to this day, is still also known as committing the largest Medicare fraud in U.S. history.
My favorite part of this clip, guys, still, is that he has to Google and look up what office Senator Rick Scott holds because he's so confident about this person he hates that he's calling for their death, which, no matter what, is not okay. But he's just so confident about it, yet doesn't even know what position this person is elected to. The ignorance mixed with confidence, the ratio is astounding. But no mention of that anywhere in the New York Times profile of this openly violent person. The reporter also very much downplayed the luxurious life that this socialist has built for himself. For example, the reporter writes, Mr. Piker typically streams from a studio at his home in West Hollywood, California, a modern townhouse he shares with Kaya, his Bernese Mountain Dog mix that weighs more than 100 pounds. Calling this a modern townhouse when it's a nearly $3 million mansion with a pool in West Hollywood is quite the word choice and very much downplays the luxury that this anti-capitalist revolutionary lives in. But that just kind of captures the very ethos of this profile in America's most famous newspaper, where they, at every turn, basically paint this guy in as glowing terms as possible, even though he's one of the most extreme and radical and toxic voices in all of online discourse. It does its readers and America a real disservice with this kind of fawning and thirsty coverage that leaves out so much and fails to really actually provide any scrutiny or nuance to Hasan Piker, despite his very dark and colored, very recent past. What do you guys think? Are you surprised to see the New York Times engaged in this kind of tongue bathing of an extremist? At this point, I can't really say that I am, but I'm still, with my internal journalist soul, disappointed. Let me know what you think in the comments. I love to hear what you guys have to say. I always take the time to read the comments, and please do hit that like button and consider subscribing if you haven't yet. And guys, I loved the episode we did recently where I read your voice notes or I listened to your voice notes. I'm going to do another one this Friday, so please use the link in the description. Send me a voice note. Got to keep it to 90 seconds. You can just leave a first name. It doesn't even have to be your actual first name, but tell me about a crazy experience you've had in the world of woke politics or just in life and ask me for some sort of advice or question. And I would love to get more notes from you guys because we're going to do another one of these roundup videos soon. And please do remember to check out the Your Delulu is Showing merch line and other items we've got for sale, all linked in the description below. Up next, we're going to talk about Tim Pool and other influencers going to the White House in a really interesting development that I definitely would have talked about if I hadn't been on vacation last week when it happened, but I had to cover because Tim is a fascinating figure to me. Obviously, those who watch regularly will remember that I had that debate with him not too long ago where he called me evil for disagreeing with him on economic policy. But it was very interesting to me because I am a believer and supporter of independent and new media. And it's cool to me that the Trump administration is opening up the White House press corps to new media figures, to YouTubers, to podcasters, to social media content creators, not just old school newspaper reporters or cable TV correspondents. I think that's great, but it is still the responsibility of new media to be independent and critical, yet that is not how Tim Pool chose to use his White House access. Take a listen to the question that he decided to ask with his opportunity at the White House, that he decided to ask the press secretary of the President of the United States. Take a listen to this clip.
Yes, many of the news organizations that are represented in this room have marched in lockstep on false narratives, such as the Very Fine People hoax, the Covington smear, and now what's being called the Maryland Man hoax, where an MS-13 gang member adjudicated by two different judges, I believe, is just simply being referred to as a Maryland Man over and over again. Now, in an effort from the White House to expand access to new companies, you've created this new media seat. So I'm wondering if you can comment on, following this expansion, you've had numerous outlets disparage the companies that you've had sit here, as well as the reporters. I'm wondering if you could comment on the unprofessional behavior, as well as elaborate if there's any plans to expand access to new companies.
Sure. Well, we certainly welcome diverse viewpoints in this room, which is one of the reasons we have you in here, and there's many new faces in this room in comparison to the previous administrations. We want to welcome all viewpoints into this room. We welcome unbiased journalists who really care about the truth and the facts and the accuracy, and you rightfully pointed out the Maryland Man story, which...
So I'm sorry, but that was tough to watch because it is so cringe to watch Tim use his opportunity at the White House to just tongue bathe the Trump administration and say, his question was basically like, please talk about how the media is bad. Yeah, we know, Tim. We know the mainstream media is a hot mess. People have been criticizing it for years. Readers, viewers have abandoned it in large part. But the independent new media is supposed to be something different and something better, where you're actually calling out the things that need to be called out. You're not beholden. You're not biased like the old media. Yet you use your one opportunity at the White House to ask the White House not about any of the massive issues going on, from the trade war to them, targeting people and revoking visas and censoring people. You're a huge free speech guy. So many things you could talk about or ask about. You choose to just say, hey, can you talk about how terrible the media is? Really? Seriously? That is basically just the inverse of what mainstream media often did in the first several years of the Biden White House, where they would go up there and tongue bathe him or his team and play into his narratives and give him softballs. It's like, that is the whole point, that new media is supposed to be different. But you're just doing the same thing. You're just going there and being the softball journalist, lobbing easy questions and layups and making kissy faces at the team red. Like, I can't be the only one who is very disappointed with people in new media who choose to take the promise of that new platform and just do the opposite of the thing that they rose up against, which was that old school media that was so clearly in the tank for Team Blue and was so soft on them. The answer is to actually be critical of everyone in government and to be pushing back on them and to scrutinize them. It's not to just do PR, but for the other side. But that is very much what Tim Pool did in this clip. And I'm also sorry, this isn't a big deal. This is maybe me being a little petty or a little pedantic. Couldn't you dress up to go to the White House? Maybe I'm old school. But if I go to the White House, if I interview a politician like that, I'd probably put on a tie. Probably wouldn't wear a beanie, but that's just me. Now, a lot of people called out Tim Pool for this, including journalist Isaac Saul, who runs Tangle News, a really great nonpartisan resource. He wrote on Twitter, genuinely embarrassing bootlicking from Timcast, and frankly, a lot of the people who've occupied the new media seat. You get this one opportunity and you decide to just lob a complete and total softball? Really? He said, this is the brave new independent media that is supposed to save us from the failures of lamestream institutions? ? Look, I think Isaac, tough but fair, this criticism of Tim and his tongue bathing of the press secretary here. But it wasn't just Isaac, it wasn't just me. A lot of people were very critical of Tim for this, and he responded with nuance and introspection. Just kidding. He put out a tweet that said, I was in the White House today, and the crying libs were not. Wow, what a sophisticated rebuttal. Haha, you libs don't get access. Yeah, but that's the whole point, that you were in the White House, and you should use that access to actually do something meaningful. If you're just going to make kissy faces at the Trump administration and not ask them anything difficult or elicit any new information or ask about anything important and just give them opportunities to bash the media, which they've already done too many times to count, then stay home. Don't go. That's why people are frustrated. That's why people are criticizing you. And no, it's not all liberals. It's a lot of people who are independents and who actually value new media and want more independent voices and scrutiny and want to disrupt the mainstream media's monopoly on political access that they had for so long. And in fact, those are the very people, myself, Isaac, many others, who are frustrated by what you did, Tim, because you are taking that opportunity and doing nothing with it and making it look like a joke rather than something that it could be, which is a promise of having a different media ecosystem with content creators and YouTubers and podcasters actually doing the things that the old school media wouldn't do, not just doing reverse PR and reverse propaganda. But that's just my take. You guys will have to let me know what you think in the comments below. And now MSNBC is absolutely losing it over a policy that the Trump administration just announced, where it seeks to potentially reward financially mothers who have babies as part of a natalist movement to increase the birth rate and encourage more baby making and baby having here in America. Here's first an update from ABC News about the policy that Trump is considering that has many in left-wing media crashing out, frankly. Take a listen to this clip.
And the New York Times reports the Trump administration is considering proposals to encourage more American women to get married and have babies. The incentives would potentially include giving $5,000 in cash to American mothers after delivery and funding programs to educate women on their menstrual cycles. The administration officials have publicly promoted the pro-natalist movement on several occasions.
I want more babies in the United States of America. And I want beautiful young men and women who are eager to welcome them into the world and eager to raise them.
The birth rate is very low in almost every country. And it's something, unless that changes, civilization will disappear. America had the lowest birth rate, I believe, ever. That was last year.
I'll be known as the fertilization president, and that's okay. That's not bad.
So I gotta be honest, I'm pretty skeptical of this policy. I find it hard to believe that anyone, I mean, maybe there's a few people out there, but that $5,000 is going to make the difference between someone having a child or not. I mean, heck, that would probably be eaten up by the cost of childbirth in some cases. It's not really enough money to meaningfully move the needle. I think would just become another tax program, another redistribution scheme, but I don't actually think would have any meaningful impact on the birth rate. So I'm kind of skeptical of this idea, to be honest. But one thing that I don't think is that it's some form of like racist eugenics or something, but that is very much the narrative that many progressive journalists immediately ran with. Take a listen to this first clip from MSNBC.
Policies that I think are meant to do two things. One predates the Civil War, this idea of replacement theory, a need for certain people to have more children, this fear of the browning and blackening of the United States. But then there's a part two that comes a century ago when child labor had no protections whatsoever and children were working 40, 50, 60-hour weeks. And exactly what you touched upon is what's being proposed in some states. And these are the same states that have abortion bans, where they want children to be driving at 13 and 14 years old to go to labor, their jobs, where they would be working over 40 hours a week. I mean, there are proposals right now to do away with child labor protections in various states and to allow for children to work 40-hour work weeks in second and third shift.
Turns out you can make that up, or at least a lot of it, because most of what she just said is not really accurate. But that's unhinged. I'm sorry, that's insane to say that the Trump administration wanting to potentially financially incentivize childbirth is some secret plot to have more white people and less brown people. Babe, what are you talking about? This would apply to everyone. This would apply to Hispanic mothers. It would apply to black mothers. It would apply to mothers of all kinds. It's not a white people program. The people pushing this are concerned about the birth rate overall for all Americans of all races. And, you know, while I'm pretty skeptical that a lot of these pro-natalist policies would really increase it, it is a problem if you're below replacement rate super long term for a population, economically, socially. So obviously it's an important thing to talk about. But these people are taking it just to instant delusional conspiracy land, immediately race baiting and making this a race thing when it's simply not, which again is just the latest iteration of mainstream media and liberal media engaging in this boy who cried wolf thing, where they constantly cry racism and bigotry about things that literally have nothing to do with it and simply are not, and then act surprised when nobody takes these claims seriously, when they actually do identify something real or something problematic, which, so be clear, Trump says and does problematic things. But when they just cry racism over anything, he could announce like renaming a post office and they would somehow find that a way to make that part of Project 2025 racist eugenics or something. That they lose all credibility and they just sound insane. At the same time, it also has nothing to do with putting children back in factories or child labor. Like, one, she's totally mischaracterizing a lot of those proposals, many of which are just not even going to become law, but also she's mischaracterizing them. And two, it has nothing to do with increasing the birth rate. It's not about getting people to the factories. Okay, it's about having making sure our population doesn't start to decline. And again, it's crazy to me because there's actually like a lot of research and counterexamples they could talk about if they wanted to just suggest that this policy is maybe a bad idea or maybe ineffective. But instead, they just can't help themselves and they have to go to this insane race baiting territory immediately. It's truly wild stuff. But it wasn't just this one guest. Like, this was a repeat theme in liberal media. Take another listen to this second clip from MSNBC.
Caroline, I'm going to ask a very blunt and maybe raw question, because when I read your story, as I read it, I kept thinking, wait a minute. These folks who are in this pro-natalist movement, do they want more American women to have children, or do they want more white American women to have children? I'm wondering, in your reporting, has that been something that has been said explicitly, or is it implicit in what they're talking about? Or am I overstating the case?
That has not been said explicitly. I think that there are certainly corners of this movement for whom, race is a real driving factor. But I think that as far as I can tell, the folks that are talking to the White House, they want to see more babies, period. And they are really pushing for policies that they hope would, create more, incentives for women across the board to give birth.
So this clip was amazing because you have this woke, obnoxious MSNBC host pushing this baseless race narrative saying, do they want more white babies explicitly or implicitly? And the actual New York Times reporter who had reported the story is just like, yeah, no, there's actually no side of that. The people just want more babies inside the White House who are pro-natalist, and just instantly sets him back and is like, nope. They're trying so hard to push this, but it's simply not there. Like, you guys know I'm happy to criticize the Trump administration. This just isn't a thing. So I'm not going to say that it is, right? And it is hilarious to watch these journalists and these left-wing activist types twist themselves into pretzels trying to invent a racial controversy where it simply does not exist. And somehow they still think that they're doing something positive or good or social justice-y. No, this is more race-baiting, social arsenic. But sadly, it's not particularly surprising at this point, is it? All right, guys, that'll be it for this episode of the Barad vs. Everyone podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you to Testimol for sponsoring. Remember to check the app out, linked in the description. And please do consider subscribing if you haven't yet. Do hit that like button before you go. Remember to send me a voice note, check out the merch, all of that. And we'll talk again real soon.